Good morning, everyone. It's now 9:30, so I shall resume this inquiry regarding the Tulip proposal. This is day 3. Can you all see and hear me?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Splendid. Other than arrangements for this morning, are there any other procedural, administrative or housekeeping matters that anyone wishes to raise?
Nothing from us, sir. Thank you.
No, thank you, sir.
Thank you. So just to recap on the programme, today will just be a morning and afternoon session. The first session will cover the technical presentation and models. There will then be a break for the appellant's room at the Gherkin to be rearranged before I hear from the appellant's first witness starting at 2 o'clock. Now, this morning I received a series of images from the appellants, which I think are part of the presentation. And I understand, Mr. Harris, that there's a way of, has been sorted out that you can make the presentation and I can fill the screen with the material you want to present.
That's right, sir. Can I just say something about the photographs? They are to be used in Mr. Harrison's evidence in chief this afternoon. They aren't part of this presentation.
Right.
You'll recognise, everybody will recognise that they are photographs of the Gherkin and the vicinity of the Gherkin. All of the images in one form or another are scattered through the documents, but those photographs were taken last night and this morning and are in one place conveniently so that Mr. Harrison can speak to them this afternoon. That's the purpose of those. The presentation is to get the models in front of you. And if you just bear with me, I just ought to say something about how that's going to happen before it starts.
Okay, just to double check, have Mr. Philpott and Mr. Linus received those photographs? And
yes, of course. Yes.
Are you content with them?
Yes, sir, we have, and absolutely content for those to go in.
Yeah, I'm grateful. Thank you. Mr. Harris, over to you.
Thank you, sir. We're treading a bit of new ground here this morning, all of us, so bear with us. As I said in the pre-inquiry meeting, of all cases, this proposal is probably best suited to an inquiry where there's an inquiry room where you, as usual, would arrive at about 8 a.m. and spend time looking at the model, reading your papers, etc. In effect, living with the models for 4 weeks and being able to ask questions about them. We're not in that position. We clearly can't be. So what we're trying to do here is to replicate as best we can the ability of you and the other parties to see and understand the models. So what we're going to do this morning is Thomas Bush of Foster & Partners, who's the architect who's been working closely with the model makers, will introduce the main models from the model space. And so our aim is to ensure that you get the benefit of what other parties have seen as best we can. All the other parties, before we're in this position that we are, we're able to come and see the models here. Second, to ensure that the public get to see and understand the models and the images in the goggles in particular, which you and the other advocates now have had the benefit of seeing. And the fact that this is being recorded is important for that purpose too. Third, who knows where we're going to be, but in the event that you can't get here, we're hoping to give you enough information in this session and any others that you need to allow you at least to form judgments provisionally until you can get here. And fourth, ultimately though, sir, if it proves impossible, because none of us are in control of where this goes, ultimately, if it proves impossible for you to come here, you can still submit your report without unfairness to us or indeed any other parties, because you will have seen sufficient of the models and the other audiovisual aids to ensure that you're able to report to the Secretary of State. Hopefully, we don't think that will happen, and hopefully, ideally, you'll be able to come and see the space. But we bear all of those things in mind in doing what we've done for the purposes of today. Mr. Bush is in a separate room from me and from the other members of our team. He'll be in the space with Mr. Alistair Watson, who's the instructing solicitor, who's also got a earpiece in and can hear what's going on, who can provide logistical support to Mr. Bush. Mr. Bush can also hear you, sir. So if you have any questions or want something to go slower or quicker, or want something to be zoomed in on, then please do that. They're all in the model room. Mr. Watson, as I've said, is giving logistical support, and we will take as long as you feel is necessary to do this, but we think it'll be about an hour and a half, maybe less than that. Then for the balance of the day, as has been agreed, at 2 o'clock we'll play a 20-minute film that's been produced by Mr. Harrison as part of his evidence in chief, and then we go back to the old-fashioned evidence in chief with documents, yellow stickers and highlighters. That's the program as we see it, and we do think it will fill the day in effect in the way that we've outlined. I hope that's a helpful introduction.
That's very helpful, Mr. Harris.
Now, I am hoping, sir, that, sorry, I cut across you.
No, that's all right. I was just going to add, as you say, we're none of us in control of events, but my current thinking is I would very much like to see the model room and ideally the presentations in large format. I would like further visits to be accompanied, and my thinking is that may not be feasible until a few months into next year, but that might have the advantage that by March the light is a little bit better for site visits. I've been thinking about it, and I think as long as what I see today means that I can understand all the evidence, then I can in fact write quite a lot of my report, leaving only the balance of weight and judgments till I've done that at a later date. So that's the way I'm thinking at the moment. But I'm very grateful for your for saying that, you know, if things don't improve, then you're content that I will have seen enough, albeit not ideal.
Well, I wouldn't put it as high as content, sir, but the whole purpose is to allow the system to operate rather than to stand in the way of the system operating. That's our ultimate aim.
Yeah, and I'm grateful for that.
And now we step into the unknown, because I think I'm going to pass on to somebody else, and we're going to pin, I think the expression is,
yes,
in the model room onto the screen. I'll switch off and shut up. You can probably already tell I don't know what I'm talking about, but others do.
Well, it's new territory for me as well, so
Good.
we'll cross our fingers.
Okay, and I think we're on. Good morning, everyone, here from London, from level 34 of the Gherkin. Welcome to the inquiry venue as we have it. My name is Al Watson-Taylor-Wessing, and let's start the presentation from mineralisation. Thank you very much.
Good morning, my name is Thomas Bush. I'm an architect and associate at Foster & Partners. I'm here today to take you on a tour of the model space we have here at level 34. I'm standing next to our 1:10 model of the base of the tulip, and its purpose is to show how the tulip interfaces with the ground. We've designed this to touch the ground as delicately as possible, with glazing on all three sides of the building. You can see, if we look into the interior, there is planting in the form of a tree planter, the idea of which is to draw the eye upwards into the space, looking at the vaults under the buttresses. On this side of the model, we have the entrance to the restaurant and to the bar. And on this side of the model is the exit for all the users coming to the tulip. You can see we have the buttresses here, which are the primary structural element. They've got joint lines expressed on them, which are an expression of how the construction method of the building will be made. It will be formed in 4.5 meter jump form sections. The three-dimensional formwork of this concrete will be bolted together and held in place by pins. We've expressed these pins all the way up the building and all the way up the fluting as well, as you can see in the troughs that go up the flutes. Looking at this side of the model, you can see that there is a different detail where we've integrated hazardous vehicle mitigation into the glazing in order to reduce the amount of bollards that we've had to use on the plaza. Looking onto the interior of the model again, you can see we have brushed aluminium panels. This is to make the space feel as light and bright as possible, reducing the presence of the core in the space. There is an open lift car, which you can see, and it has it has a multimedia show in it that will be able to be played while you go up and ascend the building. These lifts are double-decker lifts, meaning that there are 2 lifts stacked on top of one another. So in the place of 4 lift shafts, we're able to fit 8 lifts to give us a compacter core as possible. We've got an edge trim on the building that clearly delineates the plaza from the building. And we've chosen 2 materials for the plaza itself, which is York stone and granite paving. To explore this further, if we move to our next model, which is the 1 to 50 model. So the models here has been cut close to the ground in order to give you a view of the whole site. Doing this lets you see the permeability of the buildings on the plaza. It shows the gherkin in the center of the model. It shows the tulip and the pavilion. To pick up the point about the paving materials, we are introducing a lot more York stone paving into the plaza. This is to make it feel like it's integrated and included in the city's urban realm. The pocket park, which is located between the tulip and the pavilion, integrates and diffuses between the York stone and the granite to act as a kind of buffer that mediates the relationship between them. There are concentric rings of granite benches which give a place to pause. The shape is not dissimilar to an amphitheatre. Vegetation and planting creates a softness that was not present in the plaza before. We've endeavoured to increase the vegetation across the whole site. We've introduced 2 lush new green walls at either end of Bury Court. The one by the Tulip conceals ductworks once housed in 20 Bury Street. The other one is on the side of the pavilion. The pair create a green gateway either side of Bury Court. This gateway at the St Mary Axe side reaches up and over and connects into the Rooftop Terrace, which is on top of the pavilion. The Rooftop Terrace is connected to the rest of the public realm via a lift and stair. There is many raised plant beds, which are for shrubs, grasses, wildflowers and trees, along with lots of benches. On the first floor of the pavilion, there is offices, plant, and a mechanical automated cycle parking system, which is accessed off of Bury Court and the Pocket Park. The ground floor of the pavilion houses new vehicle lifts, which allows us to get rid of the long service ramp that is currently on the site. On the ground floor of the pavilion is also the entrance to the visitor attraction and to the education and community space. The pavilion is connected via an underground basement mezzanine to the Tulip, where there are the banks of double-decker lifts which take people from the basement mezzanine up to the top of the building. I'd like to now move across to our next scale model, which explores the Tulip's relationship to the cluster slightly more. The model shows the consented schemes and the existing schemes. We have 100 Leadenhall, we have 1 Undershaft and 22 Bishopsgate. The relationship between the tulip and the gherkin is immediately apparent. They share a soft curvilinear form that communicates with one another. At this scale, we get our first view of the whole of the building. You can see the flutes rising up the shaft, and you can see how the buttresses transition into the stem and become the frame that supports the windows at the top of the building. They also nest where the gondola tracks will be. There are 8 gondolas per frame and 24 in total. The top of the building is where the main accommodation of all the uses are. If we now move to our next model, we can explore the uses further. This is the top of the building model. We've got a closer view at the different uses on all the floors, and we can see the form of the building articulated in a more detailed way. The top of the building is a domed structure where it's got the bar. It's similar to other domed structures that Foster and Partners have designed, such as the Reichstag and the dome at the Gherkin. Level 10 is the building maintenance unit floor, where it contains the cleaning and maintenance equipment for the facade to ensure that it stays clean and well maintained. Also on level 10 is the kitchens that service the bars on the top levels and the restaurants as well. On level 8 to 9 is the restaurant levels. You can see there is a double height atrium that connects the 2 floors. And there's also, you get special spaces where the arches connect over the top of the windows. Levels 4 to 7 are the main viewing galleries. They're connected by a quadruple height atrium with a sky bridge. This whole face looks down onto the top of the Gherkin, where there's a visual connection below. On the back of the building, we have slides and spiral staircases which connect the floors as well. The floors will have a curated experience that explore London. On level 3 is the education and community space, which is explored in more detail on our next model, the 1 to 25. The 1 to 25 model of the education space is shown here. It's a multifunctional space capable of changing its layout depending on the user requirements of the space. Currently, the model is configured in an open plan education mode. There's no partitions, and it's open plan that enables the classes to move around the floor freely. Spaces have been zoned according to the views out of the different windows. Innovative technology acts as an interface between the buildings and the city. It augments the view out of the space with curated information, which has the power to engage the view of students in a different way. Learning at the Tulip can be curated and tailored to classes' needs. Due to the scale of this model, you can get a better sense of the core. It runs through the building, servicing all the floors of the building. We have 4 banks of lifts, 2 banks of shuttle lifts, which take visitors to the top of the building. These are the double-decker ones that we previously mentioned, and 1 bank of local lifts, which allow for movement within the top of the building. There are fire stairs and fire lifts in the center as well. We also get a slightly closer look at the gondolas. You can see how the mechanism and the structure is closely aligned and integrated. There are 2 hemispheres that make up a gondola. They are attached to a slew ring, which is gyroscopically stabilized and attached back to the track. We've explored the designs of these with an amusement ride maker, Intamin. There's space for 4 to 6 people to sit per cabin. I'd like to give you a sense of the view that you'll be able to achieve at the top of the building, referring you back to this panoramic view taken from the site. In order to help you orientate yourself with our next model, I'd like to point out the shard on this panorama and then draw your attention to the shard on this model. This is a 1 to 1,500 model of a part of London. In the centre of the model, we have the eastern cluster showing existing and proposed schemes. You can see the tulip here. Off to the east, we have the Tower of London, the World Heritage Site, and we have Tower Bridge on the Thames. Other key landmarks are City Hall, the St. Catherine's Dock, and the Royal Exchange. That concludes our tour of the models for now, and I'd like to now take the opportunity.
Just before you do, Mr. Bush.
Sure.
So we had a little technical difficulty with one of the cameras there.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask that the relevant camera goes back in reverse order through the models so that you can get a 360 understanding of each of the models, going back from this wooden one through
Sure.
right the way back to the first one. We don't need any commentary, I think, Mr. Bush.
Right.
Just
Okay.
if the inspector and the other advocates and the members of the public who are watching can look at the images and judge
Sure.
themselves.
Okay, I just need to tell the cameramen this, so they would like to have another look around the models again. If we could just slowly orbit around, going back from this one up the space, please.
Do a 360.
Do a 360.
Can I just add, please? Can you hear me?
I
Yes,
can,
sir.
Mr. Inspector.
I didn't want to interrupt the presentation because I could see the flow of it. But yes, I very much want to see a slow move around this model. And then I didn't catch as much of the education and gondolas model as I would like to have seen. So if that could be repeated slowly, please.
We'll take as much time as you like on that. So as I say, there was a separate camera that was to do that job. And for one reason or another, it failed. So we're going to do this. So my instruction to Mr. Bush is that we should take as much time as is possible to go round these models.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Can you just slow it down a bit, please, and just go very, very slowly round. Thank you.
Morning, so it's Mr. Watson here of Tulip Wessing. I'm here with the crew and obviously with Mr. Bush. When you've had, I suggest that when you and others have had the time to consider each model, then we'll move on. So we'll do it under your direction.
Okay. Thank you. If you could stop there and then go slowly back round again the other way.
The other
Perhaps
way.
at a slightly lower level. Yeah, that's about perfect. Thank you.
And so
That's great. Thank you.
if you don't mind, I am going to ask that we go in the opposite direction, back round one more time.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Right, towards me, guys.
So can I ask through you, is that sufficient? And any of the other advocates want any other views?
That's fine for me. Thank you very much. Did I see another model of the gondolas in the background?
There is, so we were coming to that later, but should we go to that now?
No, entirely what order you prefer.
Well, since we are at this end with the relevant expensive camera, we should do it, I think. That's okay. So, Mr. Watson, did you hear?
I did. Thank you, Mr. Harris. Thank you, sir. Jan, if you just now turn around and face the model of the gondolas up here, which has the VR goggles on, please. That just allows everyone to observe. Mr. Bush, would you just explain what that actually is? Thank you.
So this is not an accurate representation of the building. It is actually more for just holding our 360 node viewers on, and it was used in the public exhibition, and it would be where you would be able to see the various views of the spaces in the Tulip. So it's not quite an accurate representation of the model of the gondolas. If you wanted to see that in more detail, we can move ourselves to the 1:25 model, where we can.
That's the one I.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd like to spend quite a bit of time on that one, please.
Understood. So I'm not sure if you were able to see the gondolas when I was describing them, but we have here the two hemispheres of transparent material that are attached to the slew ring, which is a gyroscopically stabilized mechanism, and it attaches back to the structure of the building on a mechanical rail, which is not dissimilar to a roller coaster track. And we've got space for 6 to 8 people in these gondolas, with benches for people to sit during their ride as well.
Thank you.
Can we then do the same? Sorry, sir.
I was just going to say, with the camera focused on the model, could you just talk me through the core and the other spaces within that floor, please?
Of course. So we have 2 banks of shuttle lifts. So these are the lifts which take visitors from the entrance in the pavilion, in the basement mezzanine, to this floor. These are the double-decker lifts here and here, 4 different carriages of them.
Can you just explain the double-decker lifts to me? Are these simply joined together and they go up and down together?
Yes, that's the case. Okay. So they load from the basement mezzanine and from the ground floor simultaneously, and then come up to the top of the building and unload from 2 floors simultaneously as well. And it ensures that we can just get enough people up the building as possible.
Yeah, I understand now. Thank you.
Welcome. We've also got the fire stairs, which are a double scissor stair, which run the length of the building all the way down to ground to ensure that people can evacuate. We've also got the fire and goods lifts, which are dual purpose lifts, which are located here. And these banks here are the local lifts, which run just between levels 3 and 11 of the building.
Right.
We've got ductwork and the 2 toilets and disabled toilets in this core as well.
And then the layout that you're showing at the moment for the education and community facility, talk me through how that's arranged.
So it's arranged in an open plan way that it's expected that people would circulate around, viewing each window at a time, and there would be curated exhibits and activities to do at each of the windows, which correspond to the views out and national and London curriculum.
Thank you. And the if this is for Mr. Harrison rather than yourself, then say so. But if it were divided into classrooms as shown on the latest drawing, quite how would they go? The partitions.
I think that's a question for Mr. Harrison.
That's fine. He's now got some warning of the question.
Exactly. Okay. Do you have any other further questions of this model, Mr. Inspector?
No, but if the camera could just do a 360 slowly round it, please.
Mr. Bush, could it do a 360 at various levels, please.
Of
So
course.
at the level of the gondolas and from above.
So we've done one circuit there, and I'm going to suggest that we do another circuit from above, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. Right, that's from above then. Thank you.
Thank you. That's excellent.
You content we move on?
Yeah, I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next model, please.
Thank you. Next model then going down.
So the next model, if we go along, will be the 1 to 100 model of the top of the building that shows the different uses and the form of the building in slightly more detail. Are there any questions specifically about this?
I don't think so, but it's good to look at it again.
Can you spend some time on this, because we didn't see much of this. We saw more of we saw more of Mr. Bush last time because the second camera wasn't working.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Yes, we'll spend more time on this model from different angles, from the top to the mid to the bottom. We'll do that now.
Would you be able to focus in a little bit, please, on the quadruple height space?
On the quadruple height space, sir, certainly.
So that
Mr. Bush, would you point that out to the camera, please?
Of course. So the quadruple height space is here on the front face, going from level 8 down to level 4, with the sky bridge nested on level 6.
And is the sky bridge all the way around or just on one facet?
It's just on this front face here, so it starts from this gondola and goes over to here.
That's what I thought. Okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah, now I see it. Yeah. And then the slide is on another...
The slide is on the rear side of the building.
Right.
And it's arranged in a double helix arrangement around the spiral stair.
Okay. And then the third facet, does that have any particular features, or is that just viewing?
The frame. Sorry, what do you mean by?
So there are three frames.
Yes.
One has the sky bridge, one has the slides, and the third one?
They're just for general viewing.
General viewing. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
Can we go down, please, and look at the stem, and the plinth of this model is interesting as well.
Certainly. So we'll take it down towards the stem now, and then over to being down on the plinth, which has the illustration of the top of the building of 30 St. Mary at the Gherkin.
Can we go around that model one more time then, please?
Certainly, we'll go around that model one more time. Thank you.
There's the sky bridge in the on the wall in the background, sir.
Ah, yes.
Yes, thank you. Just on that note, Mr. Harris, that Skybridge image is one of the 360 nodes that we'll turn to. If you think that you would like to view the interior wall with the array of visual images, all of which are from Mr. Harrison's evidence, we can do the camera run on that as well.
Well, I think we need to do that for the members of the public who won't otherwise see it.
Certainly. I suggest then we'll do the model run to the end, and then we will track from the bottom up to show the visual array down the wall, and end at the top with the presentation from Mr. Bush of the 360 nodes.
Thank you.
Again, sir, through you, can I ask, is that sufficient for this model?
I've got a very clear understanding of that. Thank you.
Grateful. Next model, please, then.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Harris. We'll move on to the next model then.
Our next model is the 1 to 500 model that shows the tulip in its immediate context.
Thank you. And again, this is one we didn't see really thoroughly. So if we could have a look at it close to and further back so we can see the context.
Certainly, we'll draw out from the model to give the overall context, and then we will go closer in. Mr. Bush, just for orientation, would you just pick out the other buildings in that contextual model, please, whilst the camera's working the views?
Of course. So in the center, we have the...
Just pause a second. Just pause a second, because we need to come out if we're going to identify the individual buildings.
Okay.
Just come back out and back out a little further. There we are. All right.
So we have the consented 100 Leadenhall scheme on this side. This is number 1 undershaft. We've got the cheese grater.
That's Eric Parry.
Yes, 1 undershaft, Eric Parry. We've got the cheese grater by Roger Stoke Harbour and Partners. And we've got 22 Bishopsgate by PLP Architecture. We've got 100 Bishopsgate by Allies and Morrison. And we've got Heron Tower by KPF. Have we seen enough of this model, or shall we move on to our 1 to 50 model of the plaza?
That's very helpful, but I wonder, could we do one more circuit, please, at a low level?
At low level, so one more circuit, yes. Thank you.
Sort of looking up towards the, I don't know how low the camera person
Well,
can
we're going to
get,
give it a go, sir.
looking up.
We're dropping the steady cam now. We're looking up through the buildings.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
We'll now move to the 1 to 50 model that shows the public realm and the buildings cut at low level.
And again, it would be helpful here if we had the 360 from above, but then
360 from
also,
above.
and then also from low.
Understood.
And Mr. Bush, you were telling me about the way that the building would be integrated to the ground, and I'm not sure I absolutely followed every nuance of that. Could you just run me through it again, please?
Of course. I feel like it might be better explained on the larger model at 1 to 10.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll wait till that one.
Thank you.
Mr. Bush, the roof, the public realm on the top of the building that's the pavilion is removable, isn't it?
It is, Mr. Harris, yes. Would you like me to remove it?
It helps with seeing the permeability through the building. And for the inspector, could you identify approximately the position of the present ramp, please?
Of course, Mr. Harris. So they are both aligned pretty much with the vehicle lifts which we're showing here. So there is a ramped corridor which runs pretty much to this line here. So it's all of this space up to St. Mary's Axe.
Thank you. I remember that.
Grateful, sir. So
Could you focus in on the pocket park as well for me a little, please? Thank you.
Should we do one more rotation of this model and then move on to the 1 to 10?
Please, can we focus in on just the base of the the tulip for a moment.
Of course.
Thank you.
And Mr. Harrison will explain, so this afternoon, that the number of people that you see on this model represents the busiest hour of the busiest day as forecast by Steer and Partners.
Right.
But we'll come to that this afternoon.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that.
Can we go to the 1 to 10 now? And Mr. Bush, when you were explaining the nature of the pins and the spoons,
Of course.
we need to do that again, but with the close-up camera.
Sure.
Because the pins and the detail weren't as apparent as they should have been last time.
Of course. So the buttress is this large sweeping element here, and you can see that there are joint lines kind of at 4.5 meter intervals, and this is the section that they'll be making each lift of the concrete in. The concrete formwork is going to be held together by bolts that tie both plates together, and you can see that we've articulated these and they're all aligned up the building as an honest expression of how the building comes together. They're also present on the stem, which is where the fluting occurs, and you've got the bolt holes in the troughs of all of in every other flute running up the building.
And those would all be prefabricated off-site and brought along, is that right?
The buttresses are in situ concrete.
Oh, okay.
And the stem, sorry, at this level would be prefabricated, but the main mast is all in situ.
Right.
Mr. Bush, can you orientate the inspector in the sense of explaining where we are in terms of the relationship to the Gherkin and to Bush Street and to St Mary's Axe, please?
Of course, we've got, so this is the inner face here on the concave face. This is where we are adjacent to the Gherkin. So the Gherkin's moat is off the model with the Gherkin kind of being positioned further away. And then on this side of the model, which we were looking at before, the pocket park would be adjacent to this side here. So if you were in the pocket park, you would be getting views into this space, seeing all the activation that would be occurring. The green wall and Bury Court would be along this back face of the buttress where we are now panning along. And then Bury Street is then on this side of the model.
Thank you. Can we go to the concave?
Yes, I'm just going
Section.
to walk you around the reverse direction. So here we have the concave face.
So this would be the new, just pause there, the new curved street created within the site. And I'm looking out through and seeing a tree, and I'm looking out into Berry Street there. Is that right?
That is correct. You're looking out through to Berry Street.
Good. All right. So that will feature in this afternoon's evidence. So I wanted you to have that view here.
Thank you for that.
Can we pan up, please? Could you do me a favour, please, Mr. Bush? Could you put your hand into the frame? It's a 3D thing, and could you run your hand over the flutes, just so the inspector can get a feel for the nature, extent, and depth?
The flutes are here and they're scalloped to articulate the surface. They serve a function towards the top of the building to help shed wind, to stop oscillation and reduce loading. They're similar in form to those found on classical columns.
And again, we'll hear about that this afternoon. Good, so are you content with that?
I am, yeah. I've got a very clear picture of that now. Thank you.
I'm grateful. So two things. The first thing is, because of the inherent instability in teams and the number of people who are on, the quality of the images that you're seeing is not as sharp as the quality of the images we are producing.
Right.
So the entire thing has been recorded, and both in terms of pins, obviously, but we've recorded it here too, exactly as is, and we can make that video recording at the much higher resolution available to you, and indeed to anybody else who wants to see it.
Thank you. I was going to ask for that anyway, because I think it should be available for the Secretary of State.
Perfect, sir. Yes, we agree. We'll make it available on a stick, so that it could be sent off with your report and the other documentation that the Secretary of State might need.
Okay. What I was wondering is, I mean, we could do both if you wanted, but whether it would be worth editing it down into clips of the recording of each model.
Yes. Yes, so we could do that. We'll do that in conjunction with the other main parties, and provide you with a slimmed down version, but that will be capable of being replayed.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Harris. I'm looking over at Mr. Bush, who is nodding to that. Is that right, Mr. Bush?
Yes, that's fine.
Yes.
He should be, because I've just been told that's all doable from the technicians at this end.
Excellent. Thank you.
Good.
Splendid.
So the second thing, sir, was now, subject to timings, we think it's okay. We would like to show you, but importantly the members of the public, the 360 images that are available through the glasses, the goggles. You've seen them, learned from Mr. Linus has seen them, and Mr. Philpott too, I think now. But we think it's important that that experience is transmitted A, to the Secretary of State, and B, to members of the public who might be watching?
That's fine. Yes, please.
So, Mr. Bush, over to you. I think what you're going to do is, in effect, to, as close as we can, which is not massively close, but as close as we can, to replicate the experience that you get when you put on the glasses. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Right. Let's see if this bit of the technology works.
Great. Okay, I'm now sitting at my laptop. Are you able to see my screen, Mr. Inspector?
Yes, I am.
Great. Okay, so you join me here at the Pocket Park. So this is a 360 node. So we can look in all 300 to 660 degrees of vision. So we can look up and see how the tulip sits in relationship to its neighbours and the gherkin. And you can see it next to Bevis Marks, 6 to 8 Bevis Marks next door to it. We've got the newly designed Pocket Park with its concentric granite and York stone paving. And we've got the rehoused memorial to the victims of the IRA bomb set in with a water feature. We've got views opened to 38 St. Mary's Axe, the Baltic Exchange building. As I pan round, the pavilion comes into view, and you're able to see the access routes up to the pavilion rooftop. So we have the stairs and we've got a publicly available lift. There's also the 3 cycle parking loading stations located in this location as well. Is there anything else you would like to look at specifically at this level before I move on to the roof terrace? Should I do
I'm
another
quite happy
location?
for you to move on. I have looked at them and I'll look at them again, but I agree it would be helpful for the public who are watching in.
Sure. I will move now to the roof terrace. So this is the roof terrace on top of the pavilion level. Here is the pergola that I mentioned previously, which connects via the green wall to the roof terrace, which creates a sense of enclosure and allows for trailing and climbing plants. We've got our raised plant beds, which has shrubs, grasses and wildflowers, and a various array of benches. There's new perspectives on the surrounding buildings that you're able to see and appreciate from this elevated viewpoint. I'm now going to progress to our next view, which is on the basement mezzanine. This is where the security screening and queuing occurs before taking the shuttle lifts up to the top of the building. There is a pre-show entertainment piece that occurs down here to ensure that the queuing experience isn't too long for people. We now go up via the lift. This is level 3 of the Tulip. We're in the educational and community space activity zone. This is in the education mode. There's a model of the gherkin And there's a sustainable lesson plan in full flow. We can see Eric Parry's one undershaft from the view. 22 Bishopsgate.
Sorry, sir, can I just ask if all of the consented schemes have been added into this image?
I believe so. We have 100 Leadenhall over here.
Is that oh.
There may be some more recent ones that have been granted in the last month or two that may not have been present in this image, but we've endeavoured to include all the consented ones at the time this image was made.
If my learned friend has one in mind, offline, let us know and we can confirm or not.
Yes, we do. I just want to check the height of 100 Leadenhall.
Thank you. We'll check on that.
Yeah.
I'm now going to move into the next 360 node. This shows the community mode of level 3 and a nighttime event.
Do you just want to explain what those panels are that we see in the image there, please?
Of course, this is the glazed facade of the building, which has interactive displays and technologies embedded within it, which will allow for an enhanced and augmented view out here. So this, I think, has been set up as if it is a community outreach session where they are teaching communities about scripting and coding.
Sorry, Mr. Bush, are those panels in front of the glass or actually within the glass?
I think that the exact technical details of it are still to be confirmed, but we're looking at multiple methods that one could do this via.
Thank you. And can I just ask Mr. Linus, when you were asking about the view out to 100 Leadenhall, did you want to know that from the viewing gallery or from the education space?
The education space.
So from this floor rather than the previous image?
I think the previous image is taken from a slightly different direction.
Yeah.
And I think that was the one that caught my eye. I just want to check whether the height of 100 Leadenhall, because I think I understood it to be 263 AOD, whereas the education floor is at 240 odd. It may just be the way that the image comes up on the screen, but we can check that offline. So we're happy to do it from that floor in particular.
Thank you.
I'm now going to progress to the next view, taking the lift up. We are on now level 6. We're standing on the sky bridge in the atrium. Looking down, we can see the view down towards the Gherkin and the surrounding context. The sky bridge is a glass walkway that is attached to the front facade of the building. There's various balconies within the atrium that allow for a dramatic view down and out.
And for Mr. Linus, could you please pan back round to 100 Leadenhall Street?
Of course.
There we are. Thank you.
Now we're going to take a VR node, a 360 node from inside one of the gondolas. So here we are now outside of the main envelope of the building. In the gondola pod.
Can we just for my sake pan back to what's now called Tower 42, Seaford Tower?
Of course.
And there we are. And so you can see, as I said in my opening, that context was everything in those days. That is just an extruded form of the NatWest logo.
Right.
That's it. Sorry.
That's all right. I mean, I still think of it as the NatWest Tower.
You can see another gondola ahead of us on the track, about to head over the top of the arch of the frame. And this is an external view of the atrium from the gondola. And you can see the sky bridge here externally from the exterior. Our next view will take us to the spiral stair and slide at the rear of the floor plate, connecting the 4 levels. From this part of the building, we're looking more easterly. You can see Stratford with the Olympic Park and Canary Wharf. We also have a view of the Tower of London and Tower Bridge, with City Hall in the background. Taking the stairs up to level 7, we're now on one of the balconies in the atrium, where, because the floor plates are scooped back, you can see down to a great degree. That is the sky bridge there below us, with the gherkin as well. Our next node is in the skybar on level 11. We're positioned in front of the feature stair, which will take visitors up to the tallest, highest level within the dome space. Our final node to explore is one of the gondolas set up to be a dining experience adjacent to level 11. That concludes the tour of the VR nodes. Does anyone have any questions or any views that I'd like to go back to?
No, that's fine from me. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Harris, there's one more option that we can use. It's the array of the visual images from Mr. Harrison's proof, which line the interior, the wall here at level 34. We can do a camera run slowly down those if that would assist. And that's
Yes,
using images from Mr. Harrison's proof and other examples of the 360 nodes flat on the wall that we've just been going through. Should we go ahead and do that, Mr. Harris, sir?
Yeah, I think the inspector says yes, so let's do
Yes,
that.
go ahead and do that.
Excellent,
These
okay.
images are all available via the city's website, but I think it would be helpful just to have a quick run along them now.
Thank you, sir.
concludes the visual material that's presented on the walls.
Thank you very much, sir. And that is the end of the session, as well as we could present it. So we are able to set up similar sessions later in the inquiry should you need refreshing on anything. But we'd need a little notice in order to get the cameras sorted, etc. So if you do think there's anything you need to see further during the course of the inquiry, please do let us know.
I shall do that. If it's possible to have the recordings and the clips of the recordings available before we break in week 3, then that would allow me to double check that they cover everything that I think should be covered. So that would be helpful, please.
We'll do that. And there are 2 other things that are relevant to this session. The first is you have had the opportunity of the goggles and the immersive experience that goes with that, and you'll be able to note and judge the difference between that and seeing it on a video. Both my learned friends quite rightly asked that they be provided with the goggles too, and they were. We take the view that the nature and extent of that experience is such that the Secretary of State and his officials should be furnished with this information, but also with the goggles. And yes. We'd be minded to do that unless you thought it inappropriate. But we don't see how it can be in all of the circumstances.
So I don't have a problem, but I'll wait to hear from the other parties. But I'm quite content to, I wasn't planning to keep the goggles. I'm quite content to pass them on to the Secretary of State and his team to use.
I'm grateful, sir. And the second thing is we are with the other parties putting together, as you've asked us, the route for the site visit. And mostly, of course, it's uncontroversial and will be outdoors. But there is also the potential for you to visit the Gherkin, obviously, to come and see the models, but also to see the rooftop bar and restaurant here. And we would like you to do that if it is at all safe to do that, unless you tell us you've been there and you don't need to do that.
Sorry, that's in the Gherkin?
Yes.
Yeah. No, I haven't been there. No.
Well,
so I'd be very happy to do that, subject to where we find ourselves.
Of course.
Yeah.
Then
so that would be the same time as visiting the models and doing the accompanied site visits. And there would be no further evidence or presentation, simply an opportunity for Mr. Harrison and any other witnesses who are at the site visit to point things out, if you're content with that.
Yes, that's absolutely perfect, sir, yes.
Okay. Well, let's hope that can happen.
Yes, let's hope. So we're about 10 minutes earlier than we thought, but that's no bad thing. Gives us a little extra time to redo the room.
That's pretty good timing. Thank you very much. Is there anything else before we break? Mr. Linus?
Yes, sir. Sorry, just to confirm, in case we need to pick this up later with Mr. Harris's team, just checking on the figures, as we understand it, the height of level 3 is 255 AOD. And what we just want to double check, there may not be an issue at all, but just want to check how that relates to the height of 100 Leadenhall that's shown in one of those images. I think I gave a figure of 240 for level 3. It's a bit higher than that. It's 255. But we'll check that offline. If there's anything further to say, we'll come back to you, sir.
Okay, but while we're here, could we just pop back to that image, please, then? It was the first of the images, I think, from level 3, looking towards 100 Leadenhall Street. So if we can refresh our recollection of what that shows, and then the rest of this discussion can be dealt with in the usual way in cross-examination.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bush, he's now back at his laptop, so I think if we haven't already, the AV crew will make the switch onto the
Yeah,
laptop.
at least I see that. Okay.
It's there.
It's there.
Okay.
Okay.
And so we'll pass a note to
Yes.
HE in relation to that, and from the animators to confirm the
Yes,
position.
sir. It's just a double check point, sir. Thank you.
The
I
interesting
understand.
thing about all of these heights is that they're all taken from the tarmac at Heathrow Airport for some reason, and City Airport for some reason. But perhaps we can explain that in Mr. Harrison's evidence.
Splendid. Anything else?
So there's just one thing, if I may. First of all, of course, we don't object to the Secretary of State being provided with the goggles, but a thought just occurs to me about how that might best be dealt with. One of the constraints that we have in this inquiry is that the time that is going to be able to be taken with individual witnesses in cross-examination is limited. And I don't complain about that per se, but it does mean that there's a need to be selective. And trying to cross-examine on what can be seen on the VR goggles may well be something that is not possible. You, sir, will form your own views at the end of all the evidence about what can be seen on the VR goggles and what utility or otherwise they serve. And they plainly are helpful, but there are also matters that in the light of the evidence you may feel are relevant to relay to the Secretary of State in order to inform the Secretary of State's consideration of that evidence in the light of everything you've heard. And I just raised the point that when you come to the question of reporting, if there are particular things that can be seen from the virtual reality goggles, whether positive or negative, which you think the Secretary of State ought to have regard to when undertaking that exercise, I think that would be a useful thing to add, because we may not be able to cover all of those matters in the time that we have in cross-examination, but we'll need to be selective.
Mr. Philpott, have you used the goggles yet and seen the images?
So I have the opportunity, thanks to Lynn Apprentice team, they supplied them. I've had an opportunity to view them. And there are certain things which we think are very helpful. But in terms of cross-examination, to take time, for example, to bring up images from the 3D model, or the virtual reality goggles, and then to spend time cross-examining on it, there may not be time to cover all of those matters.
I understand what you're saying. My understanding is that the VR images are based on images that are in evidence. Is that right, Mr. Harris? Are there any angles on those that you think, Mr. Philpott, you would want to cross-examine on that aren't apparent from the other images? Because if so, I dare say they could be reproduced separately as fixed images.
That's correct, sir. In fact, you can get to every single image through the, I'm going to call it a dongle, I don't know what the proper word is, that came along with the evidence.
So that's helpful. We'll give consideration to whether it might be worth putting in certain stills, which are not immediately apparent. But I raise it now just so that we can give some thought to the best way of communicating any points that need to be kept in mind by the Secretary of State, who won't, of course, have heard all the evidence, but will have the benefit of your report on it. So I raise the point now so consideration could be given. We will consider whether there are particular angles where there aren't existing flat images available that might be added together as a clip.
Thank you for that. But I think that even if we were doing this as a physical event, I wouldn't want to be putting on and taking off goggles.
Precisely.
That simply doesn't work. So if you could identify any particular views, any particular angles that you can see on the goggles, on those VR images, then they can be made into stills, and we can refer to the stills in evidence, and that would be far more helpful.
Yeah, so that's helpful. I raised it because I wanted to make sure that we all gave proper thought to it. That sounds like a helpful way forward, and we'll take that away.
Splendid. Anything else?
So just to let you know what's happening this afternoon, as I've said, there's going to be a 20 I think it's 25-minute video, at the end of which there is a public-facing sum up of the project, and then after that we go into old-fashioned examination in chief in the usual way.
Thank you very much. Well, that seems to have taken us almost exactly to 11 o'clock. So if there's nothing else until 2 o'clock this afternoon, the inquiry is adjourned.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
each spoon for intimate dining. The vast majority of visitors to the building will be coming to the viewing galleries located on 4 interlinked floors between levels 4 to 7. There is a dramatic quadruple height atrium void with overhanging balconies that provides dynamic views down onto the Gherkin and past the other buildings in the eastern cluster out to the bend in the river at Waterloo Bridge and beyond. The panoramic scenery at all levels is unrivaled, and with 410 linear meters of perimeter, every visitor will be able to stand and admire the view without having to wait or peer over someone else's shoulder. The sky bridge at the arrival floor of level 6 is a key part of the visitor journey. A transparent walkway spanning across the 4-story void of the atrium, the experience places guests on the very edge of the building's facade, 255 meters above the streets below. The spiral stair with its reciprocal slide lets visitors move between the 4 floors. The transparent slide adds an extra level of enjoyment to the gallery. It is designed to be a more playful part of the experience for children and adults alike. The gondolas are without doubt the most spectacular feature of the whole of the Tulip. They give visitors a truly unique opportunity, an out-of-building experience, something they will never have been on before. A slow-motion roller coaster in a spherical glass cabin connected to the exterior of the building. The journey around each loop takes approximately 7 minutes, allowing time to appreciate the extraordinary scenery. The curated visitor experience will be far more than just a view from an elevated platform. With its very particular location just back from the Thames, and with views to 3 prominent bends in the river, the unique form of the building takes complete advantage of more than 2,000 years of history, which will be brought to life through the use of innovative technology. The education and community space is located on level 3. With an area the size of 6.5 secondary school classrooms, it sits 240 meters above the ground and has 360-degree views all around the floor plate, giving school children and local community groups a new social hub for learning, business, and the arts, supported by technology. The facility is a multifunctional space designed to be flexible and responsive to the varying needs of different year groups and uses by the community during the course of the day. It will open a window onto London's rich history and culture, and an opportunity to observe the innovations being developed for its future. The Tulips educational outreach team will work with each school beforehand to prepare them for their visit, and also afterwards in order to develop continuity with the topics they have learned. We anticipate the building, if granted, would take up to 5 years to construct, and I would like to take you through that process now. After 20 Berry Street has been demolished, the site is cleared and excavated. Then piling rigs come in to drill a series of 55-metre deep boreholes for the primary foundation of the building. Once the concrete pile cap has been cast and the basements completed, the jump form system for the core starts to rise. Stage by stage, on an approximately 5-day cycle, the stem rises into the air. Once it nears the top, the staging area for the top of building construction fans out, and from here on up, it is only the central portion of the core that continues. The arches that support the exterior of the accommodation are constructed along with the perimeter beams. The floor framing spans between them and the core walls. Gantry cranes attached to the edge of the building allow the upper floors to be constructed. The mullion system for the glazing continues several floors below the top deck construction. Once the last floor has been built, a smaller spider crane is brought in to dismantle the 2 perimeter ones. The glass panels are installed, including the dome over the very top. Next, each of the spherical gondola cabins is hoisted into position and installed on the track mechanism concealed within the stainless steel loop, completing the external enclosure. In conclusion, Mr. Inspector, this is the most important building that Foster and Partners have done in years. It combines a sense of ambition with a spirit of innovation and technical achievement. It is a striking and, I believe, beautiful piece of architecture that provides a companion to a much-loved building on a windfall corner of the site. It increases, enhances, and enriches the public realm, and it bestows a genuinely meaningful educational community benefit. It is a sign of confidence in London, a symbol of new growth, and I recommend this scheme to you. The final thing I want to show is a short movie that encapsulates all that I have been speaking about.
So, may I please say, I hope you can hear me.
I can indeed. I can't see you. I don't know where you've disappeared to, but I can hear you.
Ah. Well, you should be able to see me and hear me, so do you mind if we just resolve that?
Not at all.
Can I also say two things, sir? The first thing is, although my microphone might appear as if it's off because of the configuration of this room for the minute, I'm on, you can hear me, so don't be confused by the fact that my microphone sign might be showing off.
Right.
That's the first thing. The second thing is, you will also have noticed, self-evidently, during the playing of that piece, that the inherent difficulties with Teamer in terms of carrying enough information to enough people meant that the film quality wasn't as profoundly good as it is in the film when you see it in its full glory. And similarly, that some of the syncing of the sounds to the visual were certainly on mine anyway, a little off. Two things about that. The first is we have provided the inspectorate with a direct link, and indeed everybody else, to view it directly at top quality. And second, we'll provide you and anybody else who wants it with a memory stick upon which the whole thing can be seen in it again its full glory. But we have to live with the limitations of the Teamer platform for the purposes of this inquiry. We accept that.
We do indeed. Those are things I was going to ask. I don't know whether the direct link will allow me to download the thing, or whether I'll need a memory stick. I can come back to you on that. But definitely, I think it would be important to have that for the Secretary of State.
I'm grateful, sir. All that will be done.
Do it again myself.
And could I urge you, sir, and anybody else who wishes, but I would ask you if you are able in the next few days to see it at that very high quality resolution.
Yeah, I'll try and do that.
I'm grateful. Am I visible on screen now, sir?
No, you're not, because whoever AV2 is has taken over part of as one of the presenters for the session for the afternoon, as well as Carol. I can't actually pin individuals to the screen so that I can see you. If Carol's listening, she might be able to add me or do that herself, so that I can see you as well, because I think that would be helpful.
I'm glad you think that, sir.
Well, of course I do.
We're doing our best at this end. Can I, sir, it might be helpful while we're trying to do that if I tell you what documents you'll be needing to look at. There aren't many.
That would definitely be helpful, and reminds me that I was going to say that for all advocates, please, if they could let me have, perhaps at the end of the previous session, or at least in advance of any cross-examination, the documents that we'll be going to, then that just allows me to bring them up. Hopefully it won't take long anyway, but we'll see. That might help. So, Mr. Harris, the document.
Thank you, sir. So the first document that you should have is Mr. Harrison's proof.
Yes.
And I don't really mind whether you look at it on screen or in live form, but you should have that. Then, sir, we probably will be looking at Ms. Adams' proof for the GLA.
Right.
You
so
then
do you happen to have with you the core document numbers for each of these? It would just save me a moment. So Mr. Harrison is core document 13.8.
Yes.
And then for the GLA, is that 15.3?
I don't have the list in front of me, sir.
Okay. Well, just tell me what the documents are. I will find them.
Yes, so that's Adam's proof. Then you'll need CD 1154.
1154.
You'll need Robert Taverner's Appendix RT2.
Okay. Is that 2 or 2A?
It's RT2, sir. Supplementary views and kinetic sequences.
Has it been revised? I've got a 2A.
Yeah, I thought it'd been replaced.
It's 2A that I have.
Yes,
It's 2A.
yes, sir, I'm talking about 2A.
Okay.
And so you will need the plaza images that we sent across this morning.
I've got those.
And that should be it, sir. We've produced a very full proof, which you've already said you've read, and I'll ask that we take that as read. We've also set out the main part of our evidence in chief in the video as agreed by you and the other parties. So I'm just going to deal with one or two limited matters in the rest of what remains of today.
Thank you.
Can you see me now, sir?
No, I can't. I've sent a message to try and get this sorted. I don't know why that is. Just hang on a second. Somebody's typing back to me.
It's of no assistance to you, but I can see myself.
Yes.
I can see Mr. Harris too.
Oh, can you? Right. Well, that's
Yeah.
very interesting. I
Or
think
it
it's
may
because
be-
I'm no longer a presenter.
Yes, or it may be because of the number of people you've got on the screen. I mean, I'd have no objection to turning my camera off if that brings Mr. Harris onto the screen.
I was going to say that I would do that, sir, and see whether that helps.
I'll try it, sir.
Thank you. But I mean, it should be when Mr. Harris speaks, his image appears up on the screen. I've still got Mr. Harrison.
You'll need Mr. Harrison.
Yeah.
In years to
I know
come,
that.
so in years to come, we'll all be saying, do you remember those occasions when we couldn't get the teamer to work?
We will, yes.
So rather than us sit here, would it make sense just to have a 10-minute adjournment to get the thing fixed?
I think it would. Let's take a break until 22. The inquiry is adjourned.
Thank you very much, sir. Any?
Right, the inquiry is resumed, and I can see but not hear Mr. Harris.
I think you should be able to hear me too, sir.
Oh, I can, though it says
Yeah.
your mic is off.
It
which
does.
is curious.
Remember, I said ignore
Yes.
that. It's just a freak of how we set ourselves up
And
here.
now I can see Mr. Harrison as well.
Excellent.
And you can hear me, Mr. Inspector, sir?
I can indeed. I don't know whether I can pin the two of you, but anyway, I can see you clearly enough on screen that will do.
Brilliant.
Right.
Sir.
So
I now know
Mr.
more.
Harris will look back and say, why is it that we couldn't do that instantly? But I expected problems when we went into the presentations. They went swimmingly, and now getting back to normal. Anyway, over to you.
I'm grateful, sir. I'm going to call Rob Harrison. Let's go back to the old way we used to do things. Are you Rob Harrison?
I am.
The qualifications and experience that are set out in your proof of evidence, is it all correct and accurate?
It is.
I'd like, please, just to spend a little time with you on one or two of the projects, just very briefly. You tell us at page 29 of your proof,
I'm there.
that you were involved in the original construction, designing and delivering of the Gherkin. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And at page 23 of your proof, there's a photograph of the very large queues that always take place outside of the Gherkin on open house day, which you refer to in your proof as one of the factors that led to the generation of this project. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. You also were involved in the Lime Street Square development. Let's look at that so that the inspector can identify it on the skyline. That's page 44 and page 45, sir.
Thank you.
And I was involved in that project too, yes.
Thank you. And I think you said in the video that you went directly from one where you were for 5 years to the other, and they're both in the northeastern cluster. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you very much.
Simultaneous projects for me.
And at page 45, we see some images of the public realm associated with that project, which you were responsible for. Is that correct?
Correct, that's our reincorporation of Lime Street Square between the two buildings on the site.
Thank you very much. And we know from the GLA proof, Ms. Adams' proof, that that public realm is thought to be of high quality in the context of the northeastern cluster, correct?
Correct, yes.
Thank you very much. Then a little more, please, about Foster's. You told us in the video that Foster's operate as a partnership and they have a design board. And as you tell us in the proof, every project that Foster and Partners does requires the endorsement of the design board. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And let's look at some of the ones that are relevant and in the vicinity, perhaps. We've got City Hall at page 63.
Yes, I'm there.
Home, at least for now, of the GLA and the mayor. Sits immediately opposite the Tower of London and recognised as a symbol of London governance, correct?
That's correct, yes.
I could be familiar with that. Page 67.
I have that, yes.
On a page entitled Two British Icons, we've got page 66, Wembley Stadium.
Yes.
Home of English football.
It is,
Two
yes.
concepts very unfamiliar to me.
I'm sure they're not that
soccer
unfamiliar.
and English football. But there we are again. A new symbol of Wembley identified at page 67.
Yes.
Just turn over the page, 69. And we've got the Millennium Bridge.
Yes, I have that too.
Again, relevant in terms of context. And again, a symbol of a new millennium and an iconic part of London's townscape.
Yes.
And let's finish with 73, which was the glazing of the central court at the British Museum. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. And the use of glass there, relevant in the circumstances of this case?
Indeed, same contractor that did the top of building glazing here in the building we're currently in, the Gherkin.
Thank you very much. All right, so there's some of your projects and some of Foster's wider projects, all of which go through the design board. Put that proof of evidence down now, please. I'm going to touch on some of the issues raised by those who would object to the project. And your first heading, sir, first issue, is public realm and context to the north of the Gherkin. And for this, sir, we're not going to be strictly accurate with the cardinal positions because it's so much easier. The north of the Gherkin is the element of the site that faces on to the Baltic Exchange, and I hope that's clear.
I'm happy with that, thank you.
I'm grateful. And you'll know, because you've dealt with it in the piece we've just looked at, that one of the cases made by the GLA and others is that the proposal significantly harms the quality of the existing space and its use by being taken up with the two buildings associated with the proposal. And that is what we're going to look at for the next 10 minutes or so.
Understood.
So, Mr. Harrison, what we're going to look at is the existing space first, and then we're going to look at what is proposed, and we're going to ask the inspector to form a judgment as to whether it's better or worse. That's the thrust of where we're going. And the existing space first, please. So can I ask you to pick up, please, the plaza images? Do you have those?
I've got them in front of me, thank you.
I'm grateful. And we are looking at the area to the north of the Gherkin, for that is where the two buildings complained of, if you like, are going to sit. And I just want to see what is there at present as part of a judgment as to whether we make it better or worse. Now, clearly, one of the main and obvious features when you're on site, and the inspector will have seen it on his site visit, one of the obvious and main features is the vehicle access ramp. And shall we look at image number 1, and indeed image number 2? And while we're looking at it, I think image number 9, which allow you to see the ramp walls along Berry Court from the plaza. First question, how would you characterize that in terms of, in townscape terms? The ramp, its location, the walls, everything that goes with it.
I would characterize that as poor and lacking aspects of townscape on that northern portion of the site.
Thank you. In terms of the intervention in the townscape, is it a significant intervention, an insignificant one? Where does it lie on the spectrum of intervention?
I would regard it as a significant intervention to the townscape.
And for the better or for the worse?
It's for the worse.
Thank you. Now, what was the original purpose, need and requirement for that at the time of the original grant of planning permission by the city?
The purpose was in order to provide car parking access to the basement areas, the single-storey basement that we have underneath the building.
Thank you. And in terms of the need in the city and generally now to provide car parking along with associated offices, does such a need still exist?
The need has changed. The design of the building is more than 20 years old. The requirement for it is more than 20 years old. Back then, we were providing significantly more
vehicle access and significantly more car parking spaces. The proposal before you asks for 2 parking spaces as opposed to the 18 that we have in the existing building, and those 2 are for mobility impaired visitors to the site.
Thank you. You work in the cluster a lot. You've told us that. We've gone through some of the projects. What do you think the likelihood would be nowadays, just in functional terms, of the city requiring or indeed granting a planning permission for such an extensive car park in the city?
I don't think it would be granted. I think we would be strongly encouraged to remove as many parking spaces as possible. Indeed, we were, as we were developing our proposals and as we had our various meetings with the City of London during the pre-application process.
And does the ramp also allow for servicing?
It does.
Is it essential for a ramp of that nature to be provided for the limited amount of servicing that takes place?
No, it's not required anymore. The advantages that we have with consolidation and the advantages that we now have, the far greater reliability and efficiency of vehicle lifts, means that things that we simply wouldn't have considered 20 years ago, and therefore reasons we incorporated the ramp as we did back then, are no longer required now. We can deal with that through the vehicle lifts. We can deal with a significantly reduced number of deliveries each day through the consolidation strategy that, again, we have been developing with the City of London.
So at the time, a requirement, now not a requirement.
Correct.
Okay. And just to establish that it was something of its time, can we look at image number 10, please? Image number 10. Now, let's locate ourselves. This might be familiar to the inspector, but just in case it's not.
This is just across the road.
Exactly, sir.
Mariac.
Yeah, you've got it.
Yeah.
So
next to Pret a Manger, is that right?
That's it. Pret a Manger is the building on the right, immediately to the right.
Yeah.
And you've got Grade 1 listed church, St Helens, directly ahead, and you've got a ramp. It doesn't have the same impermeable walls. What the height of the walls just north of the Gherkin, please? What are they?
They're 2.7 metres, 9 feet
meters.
high.
These seem to be less than that. But there we've got, of its time, a vehicle ramp similar in nature going down. We'll come back to that because that leads into the site that is the location for Eric Parry's undershaft, isn't it?
Correct, yes.
All right, so that's what we got. I just want to ask you in townscape terms first, please. Back to images number 1, 2, etc. In townscape terms, how would you describe the barrier, architectural and the barrier and the ramp?
As I said, I regard it as a significant intervention to the townscape, a significant detriment to the townscape. As I've mentioned, it's a 9-foot high, 2.7 metre high wall, and that's on either side of the ramp. The ramp itself is approximately 7 metres wide, 3 metres each for the carriageway, and then a very small footway on either side of it. And the wall, as you can see from the image, it's a thick and large wall. It runs through down into the basement area. It carries a reasonable amount of load. So you have 2 wide walls, widely spaced, taking up a significant portion of the northern part of the site and curtailing and causing a constriction to what would otherwise be a greater extension of that northern part of the site.
Thank you. And we know that the building that you see on image 1, for example, over the top of the walls is a listed building. Impact, please, we're going to hear from others on this, but from an architect's point of view, impact on that setting of that listed building?
If I could perhaps refer you to either image 9 or to image 11, they give, I believe, a better representation of the effect that the wall has upon 38 St Mary Axe behind, the listed building behind. It does block views of the entire lower story of that building side that faces onto Bury Court.
Thank you. And although it was a requirement at the time and of its time, relationship, please, to the Gherkin and its setting.
I mentioned a moment ago that because of the width of the ramp and because of the width of the walls that line either side of the ramp, it does mean that from the northern perimeter of our site, that by necessity was brought much closer to the edge of the Gherkin. If you look at an overall plan of the Gherkin, you can see that the tightest point, the closest tangent, is on that northern edge. And were it not for the walls being there, if it were not for the need at the time to provide a ramp down into the basement, the northern portion, the separation from the edge of the Gherkin through to its northern boundary, would have been considerably further extended.
Thank you very much. And functionally, please, in terms of permeability for pedestrians and others moving through the site.
Again, if I may refer you to image 11, where you have a broader view of the 45-metre length of that wall. My perception of it, and I have visited the site many, many times, continue to do so, there's very little pedestrian movement along that edge. It primarily seems to be people who would be coming from St Mary Axe and transiting across to go into 20 Bury Street, the building that sits over the end of the ramp. Seems to be its primary pedestrian path. Others will find alternate routes by coming either out onto Bury Street itself or out onto St Mary Axe, moving around the plaza to do so before they go up to the northern portions of either of those two streets.
So in terms of permeability, if I want to move from the Gherkin estate north to Bury Court and beyond, the only two ways I can do it are by traversing the entire length of the ramp, either to the east or to the west. Is that
That's
right?
correct. You would have to do that.
How would you describe that in terms of permeability?
It isn't permeable.
Thank you very much.
It is impermeable.
Impermeable. Good, thank you. Now, in townscape terms, then, bearing in mind that ramp no longer needs to be there, how would you judge the removal and liberation of that space in principle? Would it be a good thing or a bad thing?
It's very much a good thing, and it would be a significant intervention to be able to alter that, to remove that, to have it opened.
And how important an improvement would that be, in fact, in your judgment, to the position that presently exists?
A very significant improvement.
You? Now, it may be a difficult question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How fair or accurate would an assessment in architectural and townscape terms be of the public realm and context of the site? How fair or accurate would it be if it didn't pay attention to this benefit? Say a scheme came along and got rid of what we've just looked at for the last 5 minutes, but nobody paid attention to it.
It wouldn't be fair not to take attention of it. It wouldn't be fair to ignore the benefits that would be conveyed upon the site by that removal.
Yes. All right. Well, I've got that. I will come back to that with another witness. But can we pick up CD 1154, please, just to see whether you and the GLA take the same view to these sorts of things. CD 1154, sir, is the GLA planning report into number 1 undershaft, the Eric Parry scheme.
I have it, thank you.
I'm grateful. Can we go to paragraph 26? Do we see, and under urban design, which is on page 5 of that document, internal, sir, urban design.
Yeah.
And then we turn over the page.
Yeah,
exactly. Then we turn back. I'm just trying to put it into context so we see the heading. So we're under the right heading. We're under urban design, and then we're under layout. And we see at paragraph 26 this: To the north of the existing building lies the road and the shaft, and an unsightly and intrusive service ramp that acts as a physical barrier to permeability. Now, Mr. Harrison, is that the one that sits next to Pret-a-Manger that the inspector identified?
It is the one that is shown on
the photograph.
Item image number 10.
Do you agree with officers that it's unsightly and intrusive?
I do, yes.
They go on to say it acts as a physical barrier to permeability. Do you agree?
I do agree.
Do all of those things apply to our street of ramp, as I called it in the opening?
They would be an accurate depiction of the ramp that we have.
In fact, form a judgment. Is ours more unsightly, more intrusive, more impermeable, or less, or about the same, or where is it?
Visually more impermeable. The walls are considerably higher. The walls are solid. These are lower. There are a series of interrupted bollards lining the edge, which allow a degree of transparency through them.
Then officers said this: the proposed development allows the removal of the service ramp and the relocation of Undershaft further north, creating a pedestrian-friendly route from Bishopsgate to St Mary Axe, and greatly enhancing the permeability and visual amenity of the area. Do you agree with that?
I would agree entirely.
Yeah. In terms of the removal of our street of ramp, is there any reason to come to a different conclusion, subject, of course, to what's put in its place?
No reason to come to a different conclusion.
But in principle, the removal of that ramp, which is unsightly, intrusive, and a physical barrier to permeability, is that something that you'd want to pay attention to as part of your analysis of the before and after?
I would.
Thank you very much. So that's one element, the element to the north-west, the element to the northwest of the space to the north of the Gherkin. I want now to turn our attention to the northeast. And at the northeast of Berry Street is 20 Berry Street. And so you'll be familiar with this, but just as an aid memoir, there are some photographs of how the building looks. Image 8. Do you have that?
I will in 1 second. Yes, I do. Yeah.
Image 7.
Yeah.
And I think there's one more. Yes. Image 5.
Yeah, I've got that too.
Okay, so now we're at the northeast of the site. Do you see along the whole length of this part of the northern context, there is a series of steps. Do you see that, Mr. Harrison?
I do, yes.
Yeah. And there is a level difference across the site, which needs those steps to be constructed.
Indeed there is, yes.
Help us, please. How does that come about?
In order to provide the sizable vehicle servicing that was required when the Gherkin was originally designed, there was the need for a 5.5 metre clearance above the ramp, and it meant we had to artificially raise 20 Berry Street in order to allow for compactor vehicles and for the larger trucks and lorries that would access the basement. So we artificially raised the height of 20 Berry Street, which meant we had to incorporate the steps that you can see here, which that level is also accessed via the ramp, which is just out of the edge of the shot on image number 9. It's hidden by the lower wall that's in the foreground. And if I can transfer you around onto Berry Street itself, which is on image number 7, because the general level of the plaza to the Gherkin is raised slightly above the footways, both of St Mary Axe and on Berry Street, but more pronounced on Berry Street. You then have to drop still further from
the edge of the plaza down onto the footway, which means correspondingly the steps up from that footway through into the alley underneath 20 Berry Street and along into Berry Court is correspondingly higher, which is why we have the 7 steps there as opposed to the 3 or 4 that sit within the plaza.
All right, so adopting the GLA's own terms for ramps of this nature, unsightly, intrusive, physical barrier to permeability, also gives rise to this need for a level change across the site.
Correct.
Right, okay, so I just spotted that there then. Back then to 20 Berry Street. So we're now in the eastern corner of the site. We've looked at the northwest and the ramp. Now we're in the northeast. 20 Berry Street as a building, please. What was the main purpose of 20 Berry Street?
It's a back of house building. It's also a service transfer building. So services are transferred from the Gherkin across through the basement and then up into 20 Berry Street.
Thank you. So it's a back of house purpose. Does its architectural treatment reflect that ancillary function?
It's certainly a more back of house building to its neighbour on the site, yes.
Thank you. And does that back of house purpose now continue to exist, or will it continue to exist in the future?
It no longer exists. The need for the back of house facilities has been reduced, and as part of the proposals for the Tulip, we would be relocating a significant amount of the plant that sits on the upper levels of 20 Berry Street. That is incorporated through into the secondary level basement, the additional level of basement that we're providing as part of our proposals for the Tulip. There are still some service transfers. The flues for the boiler flues for the Gherkin still transfer across, but they will be concealed by the green wall that we have in that corner of the site. Also the back of house facilities, the changing areas, the restroom areas that we have for the staff at the Gherkin, they are also moved over into the basement of our enlarged basement proposals for the Tulip.
So 20 Berry Street needed at the time, but back of house and reflected in its architectural treatment. Needed
Correct.
now?
It's not needed now.
Not needed now. The existing building, please, how do you read it in terms of its interaction with the context of Berry Street and that corner as in the round?
It's, if I could refer you to image number 8, you get from that an impression of what it's like to approach the site, to approach the Gherkin estate from the northern part of Berry Street. And by coming along there, the 20 Berry Street itself is butted immediately up against number 6 Bevis Marks to its right-hand side in that image. And it does form a 6-storey bookmark, a bookend, something which is enclosing that northeastern corner of the site.
Thank you. And in terms of its relationship to that corner, positive, negative, neutral, where are you?
I would describe it as an unopen. It doesn't open the edge of the site, so it is a negative interruption to that corner.
Thank you very much. So, as I say, we've looked at the ramp to the northwest. We've looked at 20 Berry Street to the northeast. Next, please, I want to look at the extent and function of the open space in the northwest corner. And for this, we need to look at, again, photographs. And the space that will be taken up by the Tulip, for example, in front of 20 Berry Street. The inspector will know broadly where the Tulip's going in terms of replacing 20 Berry Street and the area in front of it. Here we've got an image of how that area is laid out and used. How would you describe the extent and function of that open space that we see in image 3? And we also see it in image 4 and again in image 5.
the lower level, the ground floor level, and also the first floor level, they are retail units, but they have been very infrequently let. They have not been a successful corner of the site, not been a successful part of the building. You can see from image number 3, the corner, the angled corner that tucks away there. It's used for storing of items. It's not a publicly used space. It's not an active part or
Is that the street
part.
sweeper that we see there parked?
That's for, I believe, cleaning the stone within the plaza, cleaning the granite within the plaza.
So that's the one in image 5, is it?
On image number 3, sir.
Or
You may well be able to
it's
see
on
it in
all
five.
three, actually.
It's on all of them. It's on
all
3,
three.
4,
Yeah.
and 5.
Yeah, I got it.
And what about the area in the Gherkin Plaza itself, which is celebrated by the GLA as being uncluttered, vital and vibrant?
There are corners which are less than used, corners which become traps for rubbish and other items, and they're not heavily used and enjoyed by the public. Other aspects, other parts of the wall certainly are, but the particular corner that we're looking into on image 4, that has been one of the less well used portions of the site.
Thank you very much. And do you just want to say something? We're going to come back to this in the after condition, but do you want to say something about having a round building and the way that the concentric space works, and then its relationship to hard barriers?
There's always when the imprint of a circle within an approximately square form, the inscribing of a circle to that square, there is a point, as occurs with the Gherkin. The building itself touches the ground, the moat then comes out from it, the moat then sets up the series of radial concentric rings which are inscribed in the paving, which go out to the edge. And on our original application for the Gherkin, we had envisaged more active activities happening in the corner. We do have the landscaping, we do have the swamp cypress trees that sit in each of the 4 corners, but our application at the time, back in 1999, involved them being a far richer and more used set of edges. There's always a point at which, as that concentric circle runs out and it hits an orthogonal edge, what happens in those areas? I'd like to think that we can celebrate those edges and those corners more than we have been able to do here at the Gherkin, and more than has proved to be the case here at the Gherkin.
Thank you. Now, in the city's proof of evidence, Mr. Gwyn Richards identifies that some of these corners, and image number 3 in particular, are slightly unresolved corners where they are functionless and bleed away, is his term, bleed away. Do you understand what he is meaning when he says that in architectural terms? I
do understand that, yes. It's not, I'd perhaps describe it otherwise, as it's not containing the corners.
You and the city's planning officer, Ms. Hampson, says in other places, the street furniture and other elements of the design lead to the space being seen as defensive and too private. Do you see what she means?
I do see what she means. At the time of the design, when we were replacing the Baltic Exchange, it certainly opened up the edges of the site. The corners were always more security, together with an exciting and an enlivening and enriching element of public realm. The difference there is that the spacing of the benches, the spacing of the seating, it's not as linear as it is around the edges of the Gherkin. There are sometimes single pieces, cubes
that sit there. Sometimes they're double. They're almost like a two-seater sofa element that sat there. Sometimes they're much wider than that. Sometimes they form into L-shape configurations. The point I would make is what we learnt on the Gherkin by breaking down the barriers that previously existed, the solidity that previously existed with the Baltic Exchange going from edge to edge. The establishment of those walls to start the breaking down of that process, we took across to Willis, and there we were able to make them not just walls where people would sit looking out, or alternatively sit and looking in. They would look across from one another. They would be able to sit directly, be able to have a communication, conversations with people. If you'd been to the shops, the more active shops that happen at the base of those two buildings, get your lunch, sit opposite and talk to one another. I would probably describe them as a more intimate arrangement of spaces, a more intimate arrangement of the public realm in that part of the site. Along the front of the Willis building, that space actually on Lime Street itself, which separates the Lloyd's building from Willis, we have 4 large planters. Those planters, again, because of the different format, the non-linear format for them, they encourage a different level of interaction, a more immediate and I think more intimate level of involvement with friends that you might sit there and enjoy time in the summer, spring or autumn.
Thank you. So in summary, looking at where we presently are to the north, which is the complaint made, to the northeast, and indeed for much of the north, we've got the Street of Ramp and its walls. To the northwest, we've got the no longer needed 20 Berry Street and the area of open space that we can see in images 3 and 4. Now what I'd like to do is look to see what's going to be there in the future so we can form a judgment. And I'm going to ask you first to explain to the inspector what we get at the north west, that is the northwest. So we look at the pavilion, and perhaps while we're looking at the pavilion, can we also look at the green wall? And this, sir, is going to be best done, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed here, by reference to the model.
Mr. Inspector, I hope we'll be able to switch feed from me so that you can observe what it is that I'm pointing to on the model here.
Does that work for you, sir?
It does, yeah, I've got that.
Excellent.
You can, I can just see myself, yes, okay. If I could start, Mr. Inspector, by talking about the inner portion of the pavilion building, the building which sits here in the northwest corner of the site. I should perhaps preface that by saying, and you will have noticed this in my proof, during the design of the Gherkin, there was a requirement earlier on that we reincorporate the stained glass windows, the fragments of stained glass windows from the old Baltic Exchange, the main hall of the Baltic Exchange. It's the 5 Virtues panels. The original condition was that we had to incorporate them on the site. The place that we designed for that and the object that we designed, the pavilion that we designed for that, sat in this corner where our new pavilion would sit. But in terms of its location and position, this part of the site was one that 20 years ago we identified as an area where it would be appropriate to put another building that was complementary to the Gherkin. That requirement in the end wasn't needed, the condition was removed. I say that simply to acknowledge that this was a place that we had considered for a pavilion more than 2 decades ago. If I start with this inner facade of the building, the inner elevation, it is curved to precisely match the concentric nature of the Gherkin, that imprint of the building on the ground, the position of the, as we called them back in their day, the shark's teeth, where they came down and met the edge of the moat itself, and then the 4.8 metre width of the arcade, the crescent that is created and runs through this space. The edge of this building, the edge of the pavilion building, defines and creates that crescent that runs through.
Just pause there a second. in your proof of evidence, and indeed in the evidence you've just given, I think you've used the phrase an expectation of circularity. Can you say something more about that?
The circulation that occurs around the building, the vast majority of people, and we know this from the pedestrian movement studies that have been undertaken, at the moment a large number of people come from the north on St Mary Axe and a large number from the south. The front door of the Gherkin is here, and as this is the primary reason for people to come to the estate, other than for milling around, but the primary reason they come here is in order to come through to the entrance of the building here. So a very large proportion of the number of people accessing this estate come up from the south portion of St Mary Axe up here and in there. When we were considering where the front door of this development ought to go, the most logical position for it was here. If the vast majority of pedestrian traffic is coming here anyway, then having a recognition at this point, having a recognition directly next to where majority of people were coming anyway. For us, one of the first things I learned at Foster's is where's the front door? The front door here is in very close association to the front door of the main building.
Thank you. And why is it important for the building there to follow the same arc as that of the Gherkin?
I think it's a primary importance that it does so.
Why?
Because it helps to, I mentioned a short while ago, it helps to hold the corner. I did say that at the time of the application for this building, we had a number of smaller streetscape interventions that we hoped to provide here. In the end, they weren't. But holding the corner and being able to reinforce the ring, which I think imprints and better imprints the form of the Gherkin itself within its setting. I think it does that in a far more effective way than just allowing that radial pattern to gradually dissipate until it meets an open edge, an open corner. By containing that, by holding that in there, by creating the crescent and the arcade that the pavilion building would provide, I think strengthens the form and is a better interpretation of the context of that building upon the site.
Thank you. And the green wall?
Could you come bring the camera around to this side, please? I'd like to concentrate on the northern aspect of St Mary Axe. We know from the introduction ultimately of the Elizabeth line coming through into Liverpool Street, we're likely to see a redressing of the balance of pedestrian movement along St Mary Axe. We will have more people arriving on the northern portion of St Mary Axe than currently exists, than currently move up and down that part of the site, of the surrounding area. Something that the pavilion building does is, along this northern elevation, is act as a gateway to Bury Court. At the moment, we have the ramp walls, and to give you an indication of where that is, if you could raise the camera slightly for me, I'd like you to look down into this part here. I hope you're able to see the inner ramp wall lines almost exactly along that edge of the site. It's pretty much where the start of our park comes.
So the whole of the park is in the street of ramp?
Yes, all of the park would either sit within the depth of the walls of the ramp or within the void space over the top of the ramp at the moment. But along, if I could ask you to come back again to this northern portion of the site here. In approaching from St Mary Axe, the northern green wall here acts as a gateway into Bury Court. We believe a far more welcome gateway into Bury Court than exists at the moment, than the ramp that we had spending the earlier part of this presentation discussing.
Thank you. Then we know that the upper levels of the pavilion are open and public realm. Could you say something, please, about A, the usability of that, B, the experience that you'd get from being up there, and C, whether you think it's an appropriate thing that should be counted within the public realm?
The area of additional rooftop terrace that's provided here, additionally, it's the whole of the rooftop terrace that's provided here, is approximately equivalent to Mitre Square. If I've got my orientation right, Mitre Square is some distance over there. I know the square very well because when we were working with Swiss Re's new building team during the site stage of the Gherkin, we were housed in one of their offices. Their office was on Mitre Street. We looked directly opposite the square, so I'm very familiar with the size of that. And the 530 odd square meters that we provide on the rooftop here is almost exactly equivalent to Mitre Square in terms of its area. To talk a little bit about the design of the space, I mentioned the northern green wall here that welcomes you, acts as the gateway into Bury Court from St Mary Axe. And one thing that you see on the visuals that we've shown, you saw in the earlier pre-recorded segment, was as you round this corner, you get a recognition of this trellis running through into the lower part of the green wall. That gives you the registration that there is an element up there. You see the greenery extending up, you see it going over the top of the trellis. You will have seen from the 360-degree nodes, one of which we have up on that space. You can look around, you can look underneath the shaded portion. You can see the significant addition of green space that we've provided here, both in terms of the shading given by the trees and of the pergola and of the grasses, the planting, the flowers, the increased biodiversity, and the significant extension of benching that we have up there. Benching of a different nature, benching which forms areas, more intimate areas, as I mentioned, the lessons that we learnt on Lime Street from the lessons that we learned here. We're reapplying that back again with our proposals that we have for the Tulip, but we're doing it in an altogether different space up on the top of the pavilion here. Mr. Harris, you asked me to comment on the quality of experience. The 360-degree node probably does it far better than any explanation I can give of it, but I do believe it will be a wonderful place to be up there. There is great increase in the biodiversity. It's a welcome introduction of a very significant additional green space, but it adds another level, it adds another dimension to your appreciation of the public realm. The fact that you can go up here, you can look down into the reformed plaza, you can look down onto St Mary Axe. When the other consented schemes are constructed, you have the advantage of both seeing them from a different aspect, seeing them from a different vantage point, and just the sheer joy of being able to get to another dimension to experience the street scene, I believe is an exciting opportunity.
Thank you. And what's the Mayor's position, both expressed in terms of the emerging plan and in decisions, as to the usability and appropriateness of public realm at first and indeed other stories?
I read the recent approval of the building in Paddington. I can't recall quite how high it is, but it is 17, 18 stories high. But there, the addition of the public realm, the addition of the greenery on the rooftop was praised. I can see from here we have a far more accessible public realm, a public realm which relates directly to the activity that occurs down on the ground and is intimate, to me, integrally linked to the park that we provide. I see the two as being entirely related to one another, and indeed related to the gateway green walls that we have on either side of Bury Court and its extension through past the edge of the Tulip.
Thank you. So that deals with the northwest and with the pavilion. On the northeast, we've got the base of the Tulip and the new relationship with Bury Street. Now turn your attention to that, please, and then after that we'll turn to the park.
If you would briefly reference back to image number, I think it was 7, but I may be wrong. Image number 8, or no, perhaps better, image number 7. If you would have that to mind as well. Image number 7 looks, if you could bring the camera around this way, please, so we don't block the screen. But image number 7 looks directly at that space that we have now in our proposal. If you could bring the camera around to here and look directly along there. So where at the moment there are a set of
7 steps that take you from the footway here up into the alleyway that then runs through underneath 20 Berry Street in order to connect in to Berry Court. We now, because we no longer have the requirement to raise this portion of the site and to allow for vehicles to go underneath it, this portion of the site can settle back to its more natural level. That more natural level allows us to create a very, very gentle slope that takes us up here so that we negate the need and the requirement to have any steps. This corner then becomes far more open. As you approach from the northern portion of Berry Street, you come down the road where previously 20 Berry Street is obstructing this edge. We're able to take that away, and this portion of the site is far more open. I hope, Mr. Inspector, if you are able to come here, I hope to be able to show you that with the 3D viewer that you have, that you'd be able to walk down Berry Street and appreciate that difference, should that be possible.
I hope that will be possible, though I repeat that while I'd be happy to go there with the goggles and have a look at it, I wouldn't want you to do more than point things out that
Understood.
You've given in evidence.
Thank you very much. And while we're dealing with the base of the building, should we come over to the 1 in 10 model?
Yes. I've spoken really about the external experience of walking around the edges of the site. I should perhaps just touch on what it's like as a pedestrian to instead look into this building rather than your appreciation of the immediate streetscape around you. There's also, I believe, a considerable benefit that's to be had from looking into what I regard as wonderful interior spaces. They are quirky, they are unusual, but they are a very interesting geometry, which has, again, if you're able to catch a glimpse of the vault, I know we try to capture this on our video and we try to capture this in photography, but if you're able to look up and see the extremely interesting geometrical forms that are created on the interior of this building. The reason we have these particularly large windows are to give open views inside the space. They obviously allow great views looking out at the space, but I'm really talking now about what it's like as a member of the public to be here, to walk around and to look into this building. Briefly touched on hostile vehicle mitigation. There is a perpetuation of bollards that occurs pretty much wherever you go in any new developments. It's something that is obviously necessary as a means of providing security and shielding at the edge of the site, but if there's a way that it can be provided in a more harmonious way, if there's a way it can be provided as a more inherent part of the architecture of the building, that is something that we advocate, and it's something that we try to instill on our projects. Our building for Bloomberg would be a very good example of where that has recently been done. Here, the way that we're incorporating it is as part of the concrete detailing which sits at the base of the building here. The sheer size and mass that we have in comparison to a relatively small bollard means that the structure of the building is able to deal with vehicle mitigation as well on the buttresses. But having that integrated into the building means we can avoid then having the more defensive elements, whether they're small lower walls or whether they're bollards running around the outside of the perimeter of the site.
Thank you. Can we go to the pocket park next, please? Could you say something about the scale? We call it a pocket park. What's the scale of it?
Others call it a pocket park. I probably have mentioned it as a pocket park several times in my documentation as well, but it's not dissimilar in size. It's slightly smaller than the Mitre Square example that I spoke of earlier, where I was referencing the terrace area at the top. But in terms of its width, approximately 25 meters wide here and about 9 meters wide across its side there.
Thank you. And its usability?
I talked at length about the lessons that we had learned, that I personally had learned from being involved in our building for Willis on Lime Street, and being able to break the benches down, being able to break the elements in the walls down into smaller modules and to be able to mix them together. So occasionally they are single elements, occasionally they are paired elements. Sometimes they do actually form an element which reinforces that concentric nature of the plaza that radiates out from the imprint of the gherkin. But we use the spaces in between in order to provide grasses, greenery, landscaping, flowers. We're also able to reincorporate the memorial stones to the 3 victims of the bomb in 1992, which sits along the wall here at the moment. We've brought that into the site. We've placed it next to a water feature, something which doesn't exist on the site either at the moment. We think we've given it a far more dignified place within this park area. We have the shading that's provided by the trees, and we have the extension of the Yorkstone paving, which comes in from the surroundings and follows through up to the edge of the arcade, to the edge of the crescent that we hold and create around the edge of the gherkin. That also, briefly mentioned, follows through into the space along the rest of Bury Street.
Good. Thank you very much for that. Do you want to say something about the concentric nature of the new streets that are created either side of the pocket park?
The areas outside here?
Yes.
It is the extension that we have of those concentric rings that run through here. You can see we gradually widen them out as they go out. There's a paving module which increases by 1 in each of these steps as it moves away. And I think it reflects better the fact that as a ripple echoes out towards its edge, the amplitude always increases. We've reflected that in what happens here with the paving as it moves out. It's why we have the extra granite detail that picks up in between. The more ubiquitous Yorkstone that we now have flowing into the site. If I could briefly perhaps mention the number of people that we're showing on this model. This is the 325 people that are identified as the maximum that we're likely to have in the plaza at the busiest moment, which is something like a bank holiday Monday, middle of the afternoon. So what you see in terms of number of people on the plaza here is equivalent to what would be anticipated at its busiest moment.
Thank you. And the concept of contraction and release, and how that works in relation to this building, please.
A little more difficult to explain here because we don't have the upper portion of the gherkin in order for you to be able to see that. But you come from a very open space along St Mary Axe as you approach, come across the plaza, come towards the gherkin. And then as you move up here, there's that sense of compression as you move into the crescent that runs then all the way around. To give you an idea of the scale across here, and apologies if I am repeating myself, but I think it's a useful dimension to have in your heads. It's 7.2 meters from the edge of this building to the edge of the shark's teeth over here on the gherkin. And that's made up of the portion within the moat and then the portion of the crescent itself as it runs around. But as you move into that crescent, there is a sense of going from a wider, more open, completely open space through, compressed through as you run through into the arcade, and then the release as you get to this wider area. It's perhaps better explained on the video that you saw earlier, where you see the two aspects, one where you approach here and one where the camera is drawing and pulling back from here. It gives you an idea of that sense of compression and then release. And when we have looked at the appropriateness of this width, we find there are many areas, many aspects of and small areas around the city that I think that space helps to evoke memories of. There are areas around Paternoster Square that are almost exactly 7 meters wide, corresponding precisely to that. There are areas around the back of St Paul's which are narrower, more down to 5 meters width. But these restrictions and constrictions that we have, I see as being a very beneficial part of the townscape. They help you appreciate when you move from a very large open volume through into a more compressed space where there's a degree more activity happening, and then you come out into a completely separate experience with a space such as the park.
Good, thank you. Perhaps you could take your seat now, just so we can wrap up where we are on this first and by far longest issue. So overall, can you help the inspector, please, with the quantum of public realm that exists after the development as compared to before?
It's moving up to, I think, 2,720 odd square meters is the combined new public realm that we provide as part of our proposals for the Tulip, an increase of something in the order of 530 square meters. I know it's noted in my proof. My apologies if I'm getting the numbers
529 is
slightly
what's
wrong.
in your proof. So the quantum of public realm goes up. Bearing in mind what we've looked at in terms of the whole area to the north of the Gherkin, the quality of the public realm, please, your judgment as to whether better before or better after?
Far better after.
Thank you very much. And the loss of what I called Ramp Street and all that goes with it, should it be ignored?
Greatly to the benefit of the scheme to be able to remove that and replace it with a beautiful public park, and to replace it with a building which better reinforces the context of the existing building, the existing Gherkin, and provides a wonderful elevated rooftop terrace.
Thank you. That's the end of that issue. The second issue is criticisms of certain elements of the proposal. And so we can go quite quickly here now.
Thank you.
In terms of the base and the stem, you've used concrete.
We have.
And the case made against the use of concrete is, and I'm quoting here from the Learned Friends openings and from their proofs, that it's uncharacteristic, that it's incongruous in this location, and or that it's brutal. Let's just deal with those, please. We know that the concept of an international visitor attraction, education and community use is acceptable on this site in land use terms. All parties have signed up to that in the Statement of Common Ground, etc. But bearing in mind that that's the case, as an architect, how appropriate would it be, in your judgment, for such a use, in principle, to follow the characteristics or materiality of the existing office typology?
It's an entirely different use, and I see no reason why there should be an association, either in terms of its form or in terms of its material, with neighbours that are providing a financial services headquarters or another office use. It's an entirely different use. To me, it seems sensible for it to have an entirely different form and entirely different material usage.
Thank you. And then concrete. Concrete as a material. Is it new? Some suggestion in the proof that this is something that's out of kilter with 900 years of history, for example. The use of concrete, is that something new in architecture?
No, it's not.
Why do you say that?
There are many examples of quite ancient concrete buildings. The most obvious, as everyone knows, is the Pantheon. But there are many other great examples of where it's been used. Glenfinnian Viaduct. If you've had to watch Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets as many times as I have with my children, you'll see it very well in the early scenes where the flying car goes over the top of it. Entirely in concrete, absolutely wonderful structure, and a beautiful use of the material as well.
Thank you. And it
from
is
the 19th century.
Yes, thank you. And is the use of concrete as a material inappropriate to this context, would you say, in architectural terms?
No, I don't see it as inappropriate at all. I think there's a place for beautifully detailed architecture in many different contexts, and I would see the way that we have employed it, the way we have used it, the way we have detailed it here to be entirely the right material for this use and this purpose.
And with that in mind, I'd like you, maybe you need to come to the 1 to 10 again, to explain to the inspector how the fluting works, what the historic references are to it, and how it's the same as or different to other ways in which fluting is employed in and around London.
If I could perhaps start with the main buttress elements. I note in some detail in my proof about how we have detailed this part of the site, the sizes of the panels that we have used, the creation of the shapes that we have, the forming of the bolts that will be a remnant of the formwork that is used to create the concrete in the first place. We celebrate those. You'll see them both detailed here on the buttress, but it also follows through onto the stem of the building, which I'll come to shortly. The way we've incorporated a torus detail similar to that which you see at the base of classical columns here into the bottom of the building, so that it has a foot where it meets the ground, a change in the paving detail around the base to reflect where that point of contact comes through. The detailing of these gaps, the detailing of these, they're done in order to meet the practical side of the fact that this 4.5 meter lift is about the maximum height that we can really reliably do within a 1 week, a 5-day cycle of concrete pouring. Then the width that we have across here and the width that we have across the fluting here reflects the size of concrete shuttering that, again, is practical for us to use for these parts. But it's the celebration of these pieces of detail which I firmly believe people will really appreciate when they come around here, when they actually come up close to and touch the parts of the buildings that they can. If I could spend a little bit of time talking about the fluting. My colleague, Mr. Bush, explained earlier that by not having a smooth finish here, by having it interrupted, as we have always shown on our drawings, that comes from the need to reduce the wind forces that occur on the building, really up at the higher levels of it. But by creating a disruption or a disturbance to the edge of the shaft, it disturbs the wind flow around it. It means you have a less concentrated force going against the building. It's the reason why, for example, you have the brick detailing around industrial chimneys, or why you have an encasement of those chimneys with ironwork. They just help to disrupt the flow of the wind. So we always knew there was a requirement to have that. The fine detailing of this, though, the way we have sculpted out the flutes, the way these flutes terminate and end in the lozenge as it runs through to the outer edge here, all of that we have thought in a great deal of detail about how even these really small fine joint lines that run through here, which is where you've got one element of stainless steel shutter coming up against the other, all of those are honestly expressed, I believe, beautifully detailed, and I think people really will appreciate this when they come to the building. I don't regard concrete as an austere material when it's been beautifully detailed and when it's been accurately formed. I don't regard it as austere. I don't regard it as mute. I think it has a beautiful surface appearance. We're deliberately playing up the difference between this slightly smoother surface that we have on the buttress and a very slightly more textured surface that we have on the fluted portion. We're celebrating the fact that the material, the aggregate that we're using here, is ever so slightly different to here. This is smoother. It will catch the light differently. You can see that in the renderings we've shown, in the films that we have shown. It's intended that you read these pieces, which, after all, are the primary structural elements of this building, and they run all the way up to the very top in order to enclose and hold the top of the building form itself. Very much on display, of the structure very much on display, and the difference, the subtle but distinct difference that you get from how the fluted portions of the third of the stem that sits between them, all of that carefully considered, and I believe will make for a beautiful object for people to observe in the near distance, but even up close. I would defy anybody to come here to this model and not touch the surfaces of these flutes, not actually rub their hands over here. It's something I notice everybody who comes in here, they all want to do that when they come up to this model, because it is such a tactile object. And I firmly believe the building, if it were granted, would be exactly the same.
Thank you. Let's move to the bulb now, please, perhaps last. The criticism made of the bulb is that it gets wider as it gets higher. That's what we're told by
sorry,
Ms. Adams.
because I'm not hearing you directly, you will have to speak probably a little louder so I can
you hear me
you.
now?
I can, yes.
Good.
Thank you.
And the idea is that it said that it gets wider as it gets higher, and that is somehow uncomfortable. I just want to explore that, please. It's clearly, as a viewing platform, wider than its stem. Is that an inappropriate thing? Is that an uncomfortable thing, or is it something that you find in other viewing galleries?
I think it's entirely appropriate that the purpose of visiting this building is to come up here to enjoy the view and to enjoy the experience that you will have up at the top here. There is no point in this being any bigger than it needs to be. This should be, as we have done, shrunk back to its bare bones, made as slender, as tall, as elegant as possible. And then the shape and the form of these upper portions of the building are entirely a product and a function of the activities that happen within them. We've spoken previously at length about what happens in the entertainment areas, those 4 floors of the buildings where you have the primary visitor experience. The whole purpose of having this oriel window, which extends out from the circular form of the main part of the building, is so that people can stand on this edge, so that they can get a wider view, a greater field of view from within the building. They're not back within a more relaxed curve. They're deliberately placed in a tighter curve so that they can get that wider spread of view out from it. It's the reason why we have that running through. It's formed from the structure of the building, which I explained at the bottom, rises up through this dart, comes out into what I term the spoon, this curved element here, behind which sits the arches that support the perimeter framing for this building. And they also provide, obviously, the track for the gondola mechanism that my colleague Mr. Bush explained earlier.
Thank you. And will those characteristics, will those functions of the building be readily apparent to viewers of the building?
Absolutely, readily apparent to viewers from long distance away, but also when they're closer to the building, and obviously very much apparent to the people when they are visiting and inside the attraction itself.
Let's put it another way. Would the function of the building be easily understood? You've got, for example, the gondolas, you've got the lighting, you've got the spoons.
The function would be unmistakable, yes.
Thank you very much. Because one of the criticisms made about it is that somehow it looks like a watchtower in a prison camp or something of that nature. What do you say about that?
I don't recognise or accept the similarity. I am not familiar with watchtowers, but I don't believe there are any that have bars in them. Don't believe there's any that have restaurants in them. I don't believe there are any that have classrooms within them, or community spaces, or retail spaces, or amazing viewing galleries and platforms within them. So I don't recognise or accept the similarity that is drawn between this and a watchtower.
Thank you very much. So we know you'll take the all of the rest of the proof into account. You've already had the video. I'm looking at the time, we've probably overrun our welcome. That's our evidence in chief, and I suspect that'll be the close of play today, subject to anything else you want to ask.
Thank you. I think you've only run by a fraction because we did have that technical interruption. If nobody else has anything, then we'll resume again at 9:30 tomorrow morning. Does anyone else anything to raise? All quiet. Then until 9:30 tomorrow morning, the inquiry is adjourned.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.